Hi, what's up? I'm Channel Pup, the mascot for the level-headed fanboy. Welcome to a very special ranking. It's something I've had on my mind for a little bit and decided, hey, let's pull the trigger. I'm going to be ranking all 40 classic Sonic zones. And this is strictly from the mainline title, so anything included in the Sonic Origins set as well as Sonic Mania. However, I won't be including remix stages, so that does slash off about 60% of stages in Sonic Mania, and I won't be including zones that serve purely to stage a boss fight. So, sorry Sonic 2 Death Egg Zone or Final Zone from Sonic 1, not going to be appearing on this list. I also want to note that with the Sonic CD stages as well, I won't necessarily be going into much detail about the good future and bad future. It's a cool idea, and I definitely don't want to discount that, but generally it consists of horrible apocalyptic wasteland or happy vibrant area with no enemies and lots of wildlife.
Mamma mia, you made it this far into the video and you still haven't subscribed? What in the name of spaghetti and meatballs is this all about? Hey, you boy, why you not subscribe to the channel, Pup, yeah? And click on the link in the Patreon in the description below, or I'll fucking kill you, boy. Don't fucking test me. That's a unspicy meatball. Yes, it is.
Alright, so with all that finagling out of the way, let's get into our 40th spot. Metropolis, right there at the very soggy bottom of this list, is Metropolis Zone. I think every Sonic fan can unanimously agree, screw Metropolis. Even if it doesn't make the bottom of your list, we can all agree that it's a horrible level. Sonic 2 may be one of the better Sonic games in the series, but this is a blemish on this game. In terms of the presentation, the theming, and the music, it's all actually really solid here. Kind of the mechanical inner workings of an Eggman base. The platforming surrounding things like machinery, nuts and bolts, cogs and gears. And that's all really solid ideas on paper. The unfortunate thing is, it is populated with some of the most BS traps and BS badniks. Just cheap shots that even a widescreen display can't quite anticipate. You really have to have supersonic reflexes to master this one, and it's to an extent where the difficulty feels more cheap than it does actually challenging. And then, as if this wasn't already a blemish on the game, it decided to become a massive, great, whopping blemish in that this is the only 3-act stage in the entire game. So not only is it a terrible level, it absolutely outstays its welcome. It's tedious, it's overlong, and it's unfair. In at number 39 is Marble Zone from Sonic the Hedgehog 1. You've hit the ground running with Green Hill Zone, and now suddenly all of that is ground to a halt with Marble Zone. Interesting, following up that party atmosphere of the Green Hill Zone with this funeral garden, but okay, I know what a lot of you are thinking. Labyrinth Zone is surely the worst stage from Sonic 1. That tends to be the unanimous Sonic fan decision, but nah, I'm gonna say Marble Zone. Because the thing with Marble Zone is, it's not particularly difficult, it's just boring. Not helped by the fact that it is the second level in the game. Following up the joys of the Green Hill Zone, all that movement and momentum, all that experimentation you've got in that stage, with pushing blocks and waiting for platforms to move out the way and waiting for this block to make its way across the lava. There are lots of badniks packed into tight, cramped areas as well. And the Caterkillers can just go to hell. Oh wait, they're already there. They're in Marble Zone. Marble Zone is just a miserable level from top to bottom. Coming in at number 38 is Sky Chase from Sonic 2. And it's like, okay, on the first time playthrough, it is nice to have a bit of a breather after Metropolis Zone, but at the same time, I kinda just wish I could skip this one these days. It's effectively a glorified auto-scroller, except in this case, there's no platforming to be done, just bopping a bunch of enemies. Sonic 2 is not exactly known for its riveting combat gauntlets, so this just kind of feels redundant. It's okay for a breather, but anything else is just a bit pants, really, isn't it? In at number 37 is Labyrinth Zone. See? Still very low down. This stage is just a bit of a slog. The water for me isn't really the problem so much as the cheap traps. Even then though, it is round peg square hole effectively. Like Marble Zone, it's a very tight, confined space and you're playing as a character who excels on wide open spaces. Pair that with the fact that water slows him down, and you've just got this very slow platforming slog. It is commonly known as the most difficult zone in Sonic 1, and I think I can attest to that in that, yeah, it's a nice sort of challenging zone, especially that boss fight at the end as well against Dr. Robotnik. And I could definitely see why they originally intended to have this be the second level, but decided to move it to mid-game, which is why Marble Zone is now the second level, which it shouldn't be either. I feel like the second level should have been Starlight Zone. Then again, if you move Starlight Zone to level number 2, it really is just downhill from there. Okay, Spring Yard Zone should have been level 2. But then do you really want Marble Zone and Labyrinth Zone both on the jump? Oh man, it's difficult. Maybe they did make the right call with Sonic 1's level order. In at number 36 is Sandopolis. Right, Act 1 of Sandopolis is fantastic. Act 2... it's the one and only bad level from Sonic 3 and Knuckles, in my opinion. Comprised of some pretty confined spaces, and a very labyrinthine structure. This is a maze, it's got these sand slides, and you have to figure out which one to go on and where to get off. And there's a lot of very repetitive trial and error there. The idea of having to keep the lights on to keep ghosts at bay is also a really cool idea, but I think paired with that very labyrinthine structure, it does all become a little too much. Which is a shame because the theming of this stage is really cool. And again, the first act is actually really solid. It's just a shame that Act 2 is a blemish on an otherwise perfect game. In at number 35 is Wacky Workbench from Sonic CD. The saving grace here is that it is at least easier than Sandopolis, but yeah, this one's a dud. See, with Sonic, it's all about the joys of movement, momentum, and traversal. And here you get none of that because the floor is just bouncy, like really, really bouncy, for pretty much the entirety of the level, with the exception of some tiny floating platforms. The theming here feels like it should be the end of game Robotnik base, but it's just slap bang in the middle. I honestly don't mind that idea. What I do mind is just the fact that I can't just move forward in this stage without being propelled upwards. It takes control away from the player and it's not even challenging, it's just annoying. Where it does become very cheap is the fact that Sonic CD is all about time travel and hunting for these star posts that send you back to the past and then finding these robot generators. How am I supposed to do that when I'm just being propelled around? All of this is against my will. Leave me alone. Wacky Workbench is not particularly difficult and it's over pretty quick, but it's just a very annoying stage. In at 34 is Wing Fortress. Now, I understand you want a final stage in a Sonic game to be challenging, more so than previous stages, but unfortunately, particularly with Sonic 1 and 2, those first two anyways, they kind of fell back a little too much on stop-and-go platforming. And Wing Fortress is exactly that. It's full of do-or-die moments where you're dangling above bottomless pits, enemy turrets shooting at you that you can't destroy. But something that will become a theme here is the theming and music is really cool. That back half of Sonic 2 just isn't very good. Coming in at number 33 is Oil Ocean Zone from Sonic 2, particularly in the back half. This is the final zone before Metropolis, so put it this way, all of the last few zones of Sonic 2 are in this bottom part of the list. Because that back half of Sonic 2 is just full of, like, we don't quite know how to make a Sonic level challenging yet, without an over-reliance on more stop-and-go platforming. Now, admittedly, this stage isn't terrible. We're at the part of the list now where they kind of stop being bad levels, so much as just being, alright, or not very noteworthy, or just not a great deal of fun, and Oil Ocean falls into the latter camp. This stage feels like an obligation. It's just very stop, start, stop, start. Not really any opportunities to use your speed or your momentum or anything like that. Very much back in the Sonic 1 level design philosophy, although I will say it's a little less tight and cramped. I also appreciate that the oil does give you a chance to get out rather than just immediately drowning, so that's at least something. Not a terrible stage, but definitely one of the weaker ones. In at number 32 is Scrap Brain Zone from Sonic 1. I'm gonna start off with some positives. I like that each act is distinctive. The first act being kind of the outdoorsy section of the Scrap Brain, the second act being very much indoors inside the facility, and the last act oh, come on, how dare you. There are some interesting platforming gimmicks, but again, it can be very stop and go. Even when there is a nice stretch of zone for you to run across, it's made stop and go by flames spouting out in different formations. These are the kind of traps where you can't necessarily outrun them. You have to kind of stop, wait for them to finish, and then move along, and that's not how I like Sonic level design to be. It's challenging, but I like there to be the reward of being able to actually outrun and outpace the traps. And sometimes if you fall into these traps, it can be needlessly difficult to get out. And yeah, don't get me started on the third act being a reprisal of Labyrinth Zone, even if it is mercifully short when you know your way. Scrap Brain Zone is a fitting end to Sonic 1 in that it has the Sonic 1 level design philosophy, meaning take your time, even though you're the fastest thing alive. In at number 31 is Quartz Squadron from Sonic CD. This level is just fine. It's like a mining facility, and there's lots of conveyor belts, and it's just okay. It's very short. It's not really noteworthy in any stretch of the imagination. It just feels like filler. I think that's the problem, is I've got next to nothing to say about Quartz Squadron. You'll be lucky if you can find any Quartz Squadron fans. Are there any fans of this stage out there? The conveyor belts are interesting enough, and they don't punish movement enough for them to be annoying. And changing their directions can be kind of cool too. So like, just on a whole is kind of cool, I guess. The boss fight is really the only noteworthy thing here. In at number 30 is Hilltop from Sonic 2. Again, it's filler. It's alright. I tell you what, there is one really neat thing about this. You're going inside the mountain that you saw in Emerald Hill. That's a nice bit of world building. You see this place in the first level and you actually get to go there later. And you've got the discovery that it's a volcano, as inside there is lava. Sometimes it's rising lava. There's not a great deal of footing in this stage though, meaning that generally your traversal will be limited to using zip wires or using the seesaws. There's just really not a lot of room for maneuver in this stage. Overall, it's alright. In at number 29 is Metallic Madness. What an awesome kind of reinvention of the Scrap Brain Zone style of level. There's a lot of Scrap Brain Zone here, but this stage feels like it's taken it up a few notches. With some new unique platforming elements, some cool new enemies, and this sweet shrinking mechanic, which really does vary up the platforming. Metallic Madness does manage to keep things very fresh, which I really appreciate. What I don't appreciate so much is some of the cheap spike placement. Like, you'll jump on a spring and it'll be sent careening up towards spikes and you've got no way of seeing that coming. That's just cheap. But fortunately, everything else here really elevates this one. In at number 28 is Starlight Zone. Another good stage from Sonic 1. The noteworthy thing about this one is it actually allows you to use some speed, with different ramps, slopes, and loop-de-loops. There is a lot of vertical physics-based platforming in this one, especially with the seesaws, which can make it a little challenging and can require that's just a little more thought than you'd necessarily want to put into a Sonic stage. As in, it can make things a little bit stop and go. But honestly, that's really it as far as like actual critiques of the level design go. One thing I will say that does let this stage down is that the theming is actually kind of just dull. You've got stars and then you've got these urban structures and that's it. Pretty plain for a Sonic level. In at number 27 is Aquatic Ruin from Sonic 2, proving that water stages can actually be fun. It takes that upper layer, bottom layer philosophy of Sonic level design and really doubles down on it, with the lower layer being entirely underwater, while the upper layer allows you to get a lot of speed. There are elements of this stage that I'm not so fond of. I don't like that the arrows that chase after you don't actually disappear and you have to let them pass you. Like, geez, can you just, like, disappear after, like, 5 seconds, I guess? That way I'm not having to grind my momentum to a halt just to jump over you. Another complaint is what the hell happened with the parallax scrolling in this level. I'm guessing it's deliberate, but it's just kind of gross. That being said, the theming is nice, and if you're really good at this stage, you can power through it. In at number 26 is Palm Tree Panic from Sonic CD. Yes, this on the surface does look like another Green Hill analog, but this stage prides itself on its verticality, as proven from that massive ramp at the start of the stage. Its structure is comprised of so many different layers, and it makes it ideal for the treasure hunting mechanic of Sonic CD. And given how layered it is, there's so much to explore, but what I like is that this stage never loses sight of the fact that I do still want to move at a good pace when playing as Sonic. Palm Tree Panic is a great opening stage. Not sure what's so panicked about it though, it seems pretty chill. In at number 25 is Emerald Hill. Now, elephant in the room, Emerald Hill is very similar to Green Hill in terms of aesthetic, but in terms of the overall layout and the gameplay, there is quite a world of difference here. If Green Hill Zone was kind of a playground for Sonic where he could really play with his abilities, Emerald Hill is more of a speedway, bringing Sonic 2's emphasis on speed to the very forefront right out of the gate. It's an energetic opener with great theming and great music, but due to just how streamlined it is, it doesn't quite live up to the opener of its predecessor. In at number 24 is Mystic Cave from Sonic 2. This is actually a very solid level. Yes, it's quite tight and confined like a Sonic 1 level, but it does at least allow you some room for maneuver. Yes, there are instances of moving platforms that you kind of have to work your way around, but these are at least pretty quick, and there is reward for outrunning some of the obstacles. Now pair that pretty solid level design with some excellent theming, some of the strongest in Sonic 2, and some very spooky-ooky music, and you've got yourself a really strong stage. Also, given that this is cave themed, it does at least justify the tighter, more cramped space. Helped by the fact that outside of this stage, Sonic 2 is a much more open game than its predecessor, so Mystic Cave for its more cramped space ends up being a little bit more distinct. It does go to show what striking up a good balance can do. In at number 23 is Marble Garden. Now, this is a stage that has really grown on me. I do think it is the weakest stage in the standalone version of Sonic 3, but even then, it's a really good stage. There are some really unique obstacles and platforming elements to this stage, which never outstay their welcome, plus a lot of different breakable structures and walls. Pair that with loads of slopes and hills, and Sonic feels like a destructive force in this stage. There's something about Marble Garden that feels very grandiose to me. Like this would be home to some breathtaking views. It's a far cry from Sonic 1's Marble Zone, which was this dreary, sad funeral home. This place actually offers you some open areas to actually just run around in, and the deceptive bouncy spikes are a fun touch. Marble Garden might be the weakest of that first half of Sonic 3 and Knuckles, but it's still a fun stage. In at number 22 is Mushroom Hill, which is just a terrific design for a Sonic stage. So you've got these bouncy mushrooms, and it really kind of varies depending on how much velocity you land on them with. And you can absolutely speed through this level, going from vine to vine, bouncing off of mushrooms left and right. But one of the things that really makes this level great is the change in seasons, as you traverse from spring to summer to fall. It's a zone that regularly changes it up, and there are things that are constantly trying to hinder your speed, but you can outrun those obstacles or just master them. This is a stage where, with skillful play, you can really blitz it. It's a strong opener to Sonic and Knuckles. In at number 21 is Collision Chaos, Sonic CD's resident pinball stage, and is a good name for the stage as you constantly collide with different bumpers. Once again, like Palm Tree Panic, this stage is built to be explored, and I have to admit that while the pinball features are an obstacle, they are quite fun to navigate your way around. Once again, striking up a good balance between pinball features and overall level design. Also, once again, the theming here, very strong. I like the contrast between the very pink colors of the overall architecture combined with the light blue of the background elements. It's one of the more unapologetically 90s looking Sonic stages, and I appreciate it for that. In at number 20 is Spring Yard from Sonic 1. The very first Sonic stage to feature pinball features, such as bumpers. No flippers in sight, though. For starters, I love that sort of sleepy urban theme. This feels like it could be like in the middle of like Central Park at night. Although, okay, you got mountains, so it's obviously not Central Park. But there's just like a really cool sort of after dark atmosphere, which is only complemented by the music as well, which also feels like kind of a late night kind of feel, you know? And it is cool how this stage kind of accentuates Sonic's pinball-like movement as well, complete with the bumpers, and a lot of these sort of skate parky kind of areas, lots of ramps and slopes. The only thing that really does let this down is some of the slow-moving block platforming. It's not overly common, but common enough and slow enough for it to kinda just let this down a few notches on this list, whereas it would have been a lot higher. While overall not the most consistent level design, there is some strong level design going on here at the very least. Pair that with excellent theming and great music, and yeah, you've got a really solid stage in Sonic 1, something that can be a little difficult to come by. In at number 19 is Stardust Speedway, and it does exactly what it says on the tin. It's Stardusty and it's a speedway. However, even so, I do much prefer the theming of this stage to, say, Starlight Zone. There's a lot more going on in the foreground elements. Lots of these very sort of bronzy Art Deco structures, which I really like the design of. But a big part of the appeal of this stage is how Sonic can just be jetted throughout different paths and different loops and spins, shot out of these little cannons, and take all of these different little paths. There are some sparingly used pinball-y elements in this stage, but for the most part, this one is just all about the speed, and, well, it certainly manages that. But of course, what really sets this stage apart from other stages is the boss fight against Metal Sonic, as you race him through the very final stretches of this level. Using Sonic, a character that's all about his speed, racing against another character is awesome, but racing against your very own metal duplicate who has you matched is nothing short of epic. Pair that with the stakes of Dr. Robotnik chasing after the both of you with a deadly death ray and rescuing Amy Rose, it's just this massive climactic event. It's no surprise as to why this would go on to become probably the most iconic stage from Sonic CD, and that Metal Sonic would go on to become one of the most iconic Sonic characters of all time. In at number 18 is Tidal Tempest. Gotta say, very similar to Labyrinth Zone in a lot of ways, but a lot better. Level theming, again, very Labyrinth-esque, except now it's got a bit more of a colorful sort of Art Deco-y look to it, rather than the more naturalistic ancient ruin look of the original Labyrinth. But most of all, the level's really fun. I always enjoy Tidal Tempest. The volcanoes in the background are a really nice touch, and I love the lighting and how it changes when you're underwater in this stage. It's not quite like any other water stage in the Sonic series. Where this benefits the most, though, is that you've actually got space to maneuver in this stage. And the little speed pipes and different level gimmicks in here can be a lot of fun. This is a water stage done right. In at number 17 is Hidden Palace, a once lost Sonic 2 stage now brought back by the Christian Whitehead remakes, and of course also accessible in Sonic Origins. Not only is this a great stage, it also has the ripple effect of making Mystic Cave into a better stage because it gets rid of that obnoxious death pit, as said pit is where the Hidden Palace can be found, and I love the idea of a hidden Sonic stage. Funnily enough though, this managed to be the most beautiful looking Sonic 2 stage of the bunch, with a crystalline background, green glowy lights, and what looks like the Master Emerald. There are underwater sections, but that's not a main feature of this stage, serving more as just a piece of world building than, the actual main gimmick. Hidden Palace is just one of the prettiest Sonic stages. The level design is perfectly fair as well, given that it's nice and open, and you've got lots of space to run. The platforming is all nice and solid, nothing to stop and go here. The addition of the Hidden Palace zone is easily one of the best aspects of the Sonic 2 remaster, and I'm super glad that they carried it forward for the Sonic Origins version of Sonic 2. It's just a shame they didn't use the devoted Hidden Palace Zone theme, instead opting for the multiplayer Mystic Cave theme for some reason, which just doesn't fit it anywhere near as well. In at number 16 is Lava Reef. This stage excels purely just based on storytelling. It's an active volcano on Angel Island, the volcano where the Death Egg has crashed. But there are also industrial elements as well, where you can tell that Dr. Robotnik's badniks have been hard at work trying to make the place habitable and get everything ready for the Death Egg's relaunch. So you can kind of see where the badniks have been burrowing, and the place has been heavily industrialized, and it's just cool to see, yeah, that's Dr. Robotnik's squad at work. But also, as you get into darker, colder parts of the volcano, you can see where things like the molten lava has solidified, can now be walked on, but there's also like little crystal areas as well, eventually leading to its very own hidden palace, keeping in theme with Sonic 2 there, where you battle against Knuckles and the Master Emerald is situated. But that's not all, because we've got to talk about the boss fight. So the mini-boss is like a prototype of the fingers that you fight in the Kyodai Eggman Robo final boss fight aboard the Death Egg. And it's cool just to kind of get a prototype of the final boss here, a little taster of things to come. But then in the main boss, you can see the Death Egg planted into the top of the volcano, as Dr. Robotnik is shooting missiles at you to stop you from stopping him to raise the Death Egg. There is a great sense of urgency to this stage. And then of course, once you get to the hidden palace within the lava reef, you finally throw down with and team up with Knuckles after he gets double-crossed by Dr. Robotnik stealing the Master Emerald. There's just a lot of great storytelling here, even down to the mural of what appears to be a super form going up against a Death Egg robot holding on to the Master Emerald. Lava Reef, as the penultimate full zone in the game, provides a really strong setup for the climax to come. In at number 15 is Flying Battery, this giant mechanical airship owned by Dr. Robotnik, serving effectively as his hangar. This is where all of the badniks are. This is where all of those animal trap capsules are stored. Not only is it awesome to just charge your way through a thoroughly hostile environment filled to the brim with different badniks, it's just awesome how this stage takes iconography from all of the Sonic games, especially those animal capsules, and uses them against you, as sometimes you'll jump on one and badniks will spring out. In one case, it's the mini-boss. There are a lot of elements here that are very reminiscent to Metropolis Zone from Sonic 2, such as these round tubes that you run around and these very round turnpikes that you climb your way up. But fortunately, this stage doesn't have incredibly dickish enemy placement that can throw projectiles at you. There are also elements of Wing Fortress here though as well, given that it's a very similar theme to Wing Fortress. But you've got lots of platforming elements where you're suspended above a bottomless pit. But it's a lot less do or die and can be expertly navigated using your speed. Flying Battery feels like an apology for both Wing Fortress and Metropolis Zone, as it just takes aspects from both of those two levels and makes them work. Pair that with some really cool twists such as the animal capsules and an absolutely banging accompanying track, and you've got yourself a very high energy, really exciting stage. In at number 14 is Mirage Saloon from Sonic Mania. Now, you'd think this would be a lot lower on the list considering its first act apes the Sky Chase gameplay mechanic. But no, actually. For starters, for a Sky Chase section, this is 10 times more intense than the original Sky Chase was. But it's also helped by the fact that you're doing a lot more with this airplane style of gameplay, including fighting the zone's mini-boss. But it's also helped by the fact that you get to run atop a runaway train, breaking up without the airplane play. The second act is even better, consisting of some wonderful Wild West world building, as you make your way across the desert to the Mirage Saloon, an indoor section with mechanics consisting of spinny stools and piano keys and even guns. There are even little pinball elements here too, such as the flippers and the shooty guns. The theming here is incredibly strong, some of the strongest in the series, I dare say, as you really go on this journey through the Wild West, through the desert, with all kinds of old school and even Native American imagery, with the eagle paraphernalia and so much more. In at number 13 is Carnival Night from Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Now I know what you're all thinking. The Barrel of Doom. Yes, it is an instance of terrible telegraphing, particularly for a Sonic game which kinda has telegraphing down at this point. Outside of that, I'm hard-pressed to find anything really wrong with Carnival Night. Well, aside from the new music in Sonic Origins anyway. Okay, aside from that, Carnival Night is a really fun stage. It does plenty of things to distinguish itself from Casino Night. Sure, there are pinball elements in there such as the bumpers, but this stage is more focused on things like cannons, where Sonic can become kind of a cannonball, and balloons, which can be used in platforming. They even bring back some of the running wheels from Scrap Brain Zone here, but also just the appearance of this place as well. Sonic 3 very much prides itself on more natural environments and landscapes, so having this carnival slap bang in the middle of all of it just makes a really nice change of pace. Not only that, but there's also the difference between Act 1 and 2 as well, with Act 1 being very much the carnival business as usual, whereas Act 2 is waterlogged with Knuckles shutting off the power. It's probably the most tight and confined zone in Sonic 3, but as a once-in-a-while thing, that kinda works. It's obvious that this stage is kind of the follow-up to Casino Night Zone, and even then, that wasn't the first zone to do a very pinball-y party atmosphere zone in the series, but before this point, it did it the best, and I think Carnival Night, while I don't love it as much as Casino Night, it is a worthy follow-up. In at number 12 is Death Egg Zone from Sonic 3 and Knuckles. There's kind of a payoff here in that we only saw a very little bit of the Death Egg Zone in Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Here we actually get it as a full zone in the game. Act 1 taking place inside the Death Egg, where all of the activities going on, and with loads of unique gravity gimmicks, with Act 2 taking place outside of the Death Egg, as you can see the Earth looming below. Oops, sorry game apologist, did I just say the E word? There's a sense that this place operates like a well-oiled machine, as almost every platform in this stage has some kind of different gimmick to it. It's a very utilitarian environment, but at the same time, unlike previous final stages in the series, such as Scrap Brain Zone and Metallic Madness and Metropolis, yeah, there's a great sense of flow to this one. It demonstrates that the final stage can still pose a challenge without stopping the player dead in their tracks every 5 seconds, which I really appreciate. There's no cheap BS here, just reward for skillful play. Death Egg is everything a final Sonic level, in the classics anyway, should be. In at number 11 is Press Garden from Sonic Mania. Another really cool bit of world building, because like, who makes the newspapers in the Sonic universe? Well, it's not a question I ever asked, but here it is. Alright, well, what if I told you that the newspaper printing press is in the most beautiful, luscious garden you've ever seen? That Mania team has some imagination. I need to know what it is they smoked to come to this conclusion. It's also helped by the fact that it's just a damn fine level in general. Act 1 being full of conveyor belts, crates, and even these little text blocks that reappear and disappear for platforming. Act 1 especially goes very hard with utilizing printing press gimmicks into the platforming of the stage, where Act 2 kind of doubles up as like an ice-themed level, with lots of the platforming, obstacles, and collectibles sealed inside ice blocks. And there are also freeze machines that can freeze Sonic and Tails in blocks of ice. Now, you would think that that would be purely just an obstacle made to deter the player, but no, if you think outside the box, or inside the ice block in this case, you can actually benefit from being sealed in a block of ice. It by no means discourages that fast-paced Sonic style of play, but at the same time, it does reward the player for being patient too, which is an excellent balance. Plus, the music for Press Garden is just as gorgeous as the aesthetic. In at number 10 is Titanic Monarch from Sonic Mania. Now, I said that Death Egg was, how to do a classic Sonic finale stage. Titanic Monarch is even better. Like with Death Egg, there's a lot of very dynamic level design here. Lots of very functional platforms. But Titanic Monarch by no means relies on the same tricks. We do, however, get the light orbs from Sonic 3's bonus stages implemented into an actual level here, and they complement the flow really nicely. It can take a moment to work out what direction you want to move in, and obviously how long to stick around in order to gauge your jump, but you get a good flow state down, and you can really go through these really quickly, which is everything a Sonic obstacle should be. But what's also great is, while there is no shortage of obstacles and enemies, especially some very unique enemy types that can lock onto you, Titanic Monarch has no shortage of slopes and loops for you to just fling yourself around. Meaning that once you overcome one of the more intense moments of platforming, you are rewarded with this speedway where you can just let loose. So there's this wonderful marriage between moving fast and enjoying your movement as Sonic, as well as challenging platforming. Act 1 has a very linear structure, where Act 2 is a little bit more experimental, going non-linear as you jump into different portals and complete different mini-levels, and this actually works pretty well. But the best thing about this stage is how foreboding it is. There's this atmosphere that feels like you shouldn't be there. You are running around behind the scenes of an Eggman operation. The sound design for the different enemies and different platforms is just really creepy. And then there's the incredibly ominous and foreboding track by T. Lopes. It just feels like you're not supposed to be there, in a way that I haven't really gotten from any other final stage in any of these Sonic games, which I just think is fantastic. Titanic Monarch is probably one of the best ending levels in any Sonic game I've played, at least as far as 2D Sonic games go. In at number 9 is the inescapable and frankly inevitable chemical plant from Sonic the Hedgehog 2. No matter how much fatigue I have for this stage being brought back in later games, at the end of the day, a good level is a good level, and chemical plant is a really good level. Packed to the brim with slopes, hills, obstacles, it's just everything you could want from a Sonic level. It's a very layered stage with a thrilling upper path and a much more arduous lower path. The music absolutely slaps. There's a little taster of an underwater section, but it's not too much. But also the fact that this stage set the precedent for what Sonic 2 was all about. This was the stage that set the way for the future of the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise. See, this is the second level of Sonic 2. The second stage of Sonic 1 was Marble Zone, and from there, it was all very arduous, slow-paced platforming. Here we've got a stage that is even faster paced than Emerald Hill before it, while having more obstacles and enemies. Showcasing that, yes, Sonic Team were able to ramp up the challenge a little bit without costing any of the speed. In a lot of ways, this was really the stage where Sonic became Sonic. That true follow-up to Green Hill Zone, which is probably why they keep following it up from Green Hill Zone in every game nowadays. No matter how awesome that was back in the day, stop it, okay? Just stop it. It's a real shame how much repetition has completely changed the tone of what this segment would otherwise be. I'm supposed to be celebrating this stage. It's in at number 9 out of 40. That's very impressive. In at number 8 is Casino Night Zone from Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Effectively the successor to Spring Yard Zone from Sonic the Hedgehog 1. Casino Night Zone set the precedent for Sonic's gambling addiction. It's another urban stage. It's got more pinball gimmicks, including the first use in this series of pinball flippers, unless you view Sonic CD as the second game in the series. Okay, narratively, Sonic CD takes place before Sonic 2, but Sonic 2 released a whole ass year earlier. So I'm gonna go with Sonic 2 and just say, yeah, this was the first time we saw like pinball flippers in a Sonic game. But we've also got these slot machines that can reward you with rings, or it can take away your rings if it's feeling extra eggy today. There are so many different ways to ground up points and rings in this stage, and it can be very rewarding. But I think what really makes this one is not just those mechanics, it's not just that Vegas-y look of the stage, but it's also just the music, creating this very party atmosphere. I don't think this stage would go down in Sonic history quite the way it did without that toe-tapping big band style music. And what's so impressive about that is how they achieved the sound of the toe-tapping big band jazz through the Sega Genesis' 16-bit sound chip. A testament to not just what that chip is capable of, but what the right musicians can do with it. Casino Night is like a party midway through Sonic 2. A celebration of your progress, a celebration of you as a player. Now go gamble to your heart's content. Bankrupt yourself. Go get a hooker. In at number 7 is Sky Sanctuary, the luscious floating home of Knuckles the Echidna. This is the build-up to the very climax of Sonic 3 and Knuckles, which is a very climactic game in general. It's a single act, but there is some challenging platforming here. You have to really be able to preempt the blasts from Robotnik's iconic egg robos. You start witnessing the Death Egg rise back into the sky, knowing you have to stop at nothing to take that thing down again. Knuckles helps you navigate the place, and Dr. Robotnik has sent his mercenary on you, Mecha Sonic, reprising a small number of different bosses from the series before just deciding to fight you mano-a-mano. And then once you've taken him down, you climb your way up to the Death Egg. See, Sonic 2, look at this. This is how you do a transitionary chapter. Sky Chase and Wing Fortress can bite it. You've got this stage here, which is neither as tough as some of the levels before it, meaning that the player gets a bit of a breather before the big ending, but it isn't boring, and it ramps up the intensity from a plot perspective, without going nuts with bottomless pits or cheap BS. This is how you do that pre-finale act. In at number 6 is Ice Cap Zone from Sonic 3. Narratively, very little actually happens here, but that doesn't stop us from getting an iconic set piece as Sonic snowboards down the icy mountains, and you have to navigate your way through the icy caves of the Ice Cap Zone. Now, one thing I really appreciate about this stage is that they didn't go nuts on ice physics, where the challenge is, oh, isn't it so slippery? No, they don't even do that. Ice Cap is probably just the most conventional Sonic stage in Sonic 3 and Knuckles, but it's just a very enjoyable stage. No major gimmicks here, you just make your way out of an ice cave. Another thing is that after the slightly more intense Carnival Night, and before the climactic launch base zone, this is a bit of an easier stage, much more straightforward. I don't have much to say about Ice Cap Zone. Its simplicity is kind of what makes it work. That doesn't mean there's nothing here. There's some cool stuff like pushing this platform along and jumping on it and being carried over to the next part of the level, falling icicles, these bouncy trapeze thingies. I don't know what to call them. But you don't have anything like a forest getting bombed or Knuckles shutting off the power or some obnoxious race against the clock. It's a straightforward A to B Sonic stage, which is honestly dearly needed as a pace breaker for Sonic 3 amidst all the excitement that comes with that game. Great design, great music in the original release, sadly still not great in Sonic Origins. Just a good time all around. In at number 5 is Green Hill Zone from Sonic the Hedgehog 1. Yep, number 5. Nice to see that it wasn't entirely downhill from here, but it was this perfect lightning in a bottle storm to introduce us to Sonic the Hedgehog. Beautiful, luscious green landscapes to offset our blue spiky friend. But this is not simply a green hill. No. This is a coastal, palm tree-laden jungle gym with a very unique Art Deco art style and a surprising amount of subliminal imagery prompting the player to just go forward. What's so great about this stage is A, how multi-layered it is, B, how open it is, giving you loads of space to experiment with Sonic's gameplay style, and it just kind of lets you go it at your own pace. It sets a precedent that very little of the rest of Sonic 1 would actually follow up on. It's probably why it's one of the most highly revisited classic Sonic stages, though, is that it gives you the space to play the game at your own pace and just enjoy playing as Sonic. It is the perfect opening stage for this whole franchise, full of iconic imagery, obviously iconic music, like don't even get me started, and most of all, it's just a fun place to kind of take your time and go for a stroll. There's not really much more I can say about Green Hill Zone that hasn't already been said, so I'm just going to move over to the next one. In at number 4 is Angel Island from Sonic 3. Now, what's kind of funny about this is that the entire island you play on in Sonic 3 is called Angel Island, yet the first stage here is called Angel Island and everything else has a different name. I guess it's kind of introduction to Angel Island? Anyways, this stage, like Green Hill Zone, is like a literal jungle gym. Except now you're actually in a tropical jungle this time. You can speed your way through the ground level, or you can swing from vine to vine. You can splash about in the water, and you can speed your way around slopes and loop-de-loops. Even running your way up this tree. There is a lot to play with here. But Angel Island sets a precedent for the Sonic franchise. This was our first instance of real storytelling taking place in Sonic stages, as halfway through the first act, the place gets completely carpet-bombed by Dr. Robotnik, setting up Robotnik as much more of a threat than ever before. And then for the remainder of the first act and also the second act, you're running through a blazing inferno, a jungle on fire, and what a unique way to subvert the expectation of that luscious paradise Sonic opener and turn it into a flaming nightmare. At the end of the second act, you have to outrun Robotnik's airship as he carpet bombs the rest of the island, and then you chase him through the forest as you see him in the background and sirens blaze. So you've got that fun gameplay that you'd get from Green Hill Zone, but with phenomenal storytelling. Is it as visually iconic as Green Hill Zone? No, but that's a sacrifice I'm willing to make for that amazing storytelling. In at number 3 is Launch Base Zone from Sonic the Hedgehog 3. I am a huge fan of Launch Base Zone. The way I see it, it's like Chemical Plant, but even cooler. It is the midway point of Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Dr. Robotnik's first attempt to get the Death Egg back in the sky, and you just have to chase him down and stop him. I love running through the first act as you can see the Death Egg in the water looming over you, traversing through construction terminals. There's a lot of great world building here. I love that sort of South Asian aesthetic to some of the architecture, and you can see Dr. Robotnik transporting cargo around the stage only to find out that said cargo is the mini-boss you have to fight. It gives a sense that Robotnik doesn't have the time to take you on right now. The relaunch of the Death Egg is just more important. Then with the second act, you're making your way over to the Death Egg, and it's filled with these water pipes like we've seen in Chemical Plant, except this time we actually get to go inside them. There are some nice underwater sections here as well. While it's not like an underwater stage in general, it does have underwater areas, which do a nice job at varying up the platforming. And then you take on Dr. Robotnik 3 times. Once at the bridge to the Death Egg, before you hop in his Eggomatic yourself and make your way over to the Death Egg's undercarriage, where you fight him in this tower machine with the rotating laser, followed by fighting against the iconic Big Arms, as the sky goes dark and you know you're in for a dramatic showdown. Launch Base Zone is just epic. There's a sense that Dr. Robotnik and his badniks are all hard at work, and a sense of dread as the Death Egg looms over you. But it's also just a damn fun stage as well, with lots of platforming mechanics that do feel like they would exist in a construction environment, such as elevators and pulleys. Overall, fantastic level, both as a midway point for Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and as a finale for Sonic 3 standalone. In at number 2, we have Studiopolis from Sonic Mania. And like the other original stages in Sonic Mania, there is an excellent sense of world building. This is the TV and film industry of the Sonic universe, except it's been taken over by Dr. Robotnik. It's a glitzy, glamorous, Hollywood-inspired location, full of neon-clad buildings, TVs, monitors, clapperboards, satellites that push you around the stage, a popcorn dispenser paying homage to the Sega Sonic popcorn shop, unique lighting effects. This stage just has everything. But amidst all of that is this really fun speedway environment for Sonic to just run and sprint and roll his way around. Tons of different unique loop-de-loops, different slopes. But best of all, this is, in my opinion, aesthetically speaking, the quintessential Sonic stage. This stage just screams Sonic in terms of its art direction, with a gorgeous palette of light blue, gold and purple. A city in the sunset gleams in the distance. Every platform, every surface you run on has been gorgeously designed. This is just the ultimate Sonic level in terms of its aesthetic, and the music is no slouch either. T-Lopes did a wonderful job creating music to set the scene for this stage. The Mania team did such a wonderful job on the original stages in this game, it's a wonder why they couldn't just do all of the levels for this game, rather than having remixed stages. And in at number 1 is Hydro City from Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Back when we were talking about Labyrinth Zone earlier on, who would have thought that a water stage would be the number 1 classic Sonic stage on this list? Hydro City is, in my opinion, the most fun classic Sonic stage to just power through. With Act 1, you are making your way through this waterway, filled with different conveyor belts, different traps, different obstacles, little cannon turrets, and there is quite a bit of vertical platforming here, but where this really works is that Hydro City does not lose sight of the fact that you still want to go fast as Sonic. So it's still packed to the brim with slopes and loop-de-loops, and there's plenty of space to really make your way around. There are also instances where you have to switch on a fan to propel you upwards through the waterways. Act 1 is a lot of fun, but it's Act 2 where this stage really shines the most. With Act 2, the stage begins with the walls closing in on you, but this time challenge does not outstay its welcome by any stretch. There's a lot of fast-paced vertical platforming here, but the best thing about Act 2 is it's basically a water park. This probably has some of the most slopes and loops of any Sonic stage ever, as you're just being flung through different water slides, which give you a ton of airtime. These slides can allow you to build up so much momentum that you could just run on top of the water instead of having to do any of the underwater platforming. And the way these slides twizzle and twirl their way around, it's got a lot of spectacle to it. Visually, the level is also very pretty, consisting of like a very golden brick texture with a nice purple backdrop. It feels a little darker than Labyrinth Zone, but it also feels a lot grander than Labyrinth Zone. In fact, aesthetically speaking, they are not worlds apart, as you still have this very sort of ancient brick look, these ancient glyphs all over the place. But Hydro City Zone has much more color diversity, especially with these blue water slides. Hydro City is not only a really fun stage to just traverse your way through, it's also packed to the bursting point with thrills and spills. And the music? Yeah, it goes hard. Which is why Hydro City is my number 1 favorite classic Sonic stage of all time. The question is, can it be dethroned? As we've got Sonic Superstars releasing this fall, a side-scrolling classic Sonic game featuring all new, all original stages. Where will those stages factor into this ranking? Can Metropolis be dethroned as the worst classic Sonic stage? So many questions, but my number 1 question is this. What do you guys think? How would you rank the classic Sonic stages? Comment below, discuss, and as always, if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more like it, be sure to hit subscribe, hit the like button, and in the description below is a link to my Patreon page, where for as little as $1 a month, you can get your name in the credits of my videos. And now for a special shout out for the patrons in the $10 or above tier. We have Sharif, Dear Danny, Cal Bennett, That Jordo, KennethKozlowski.com, Legendary Ray Ray, Dr. SP here. During this time of year, many Americans get angry at the sky and try to blow it up. We know what it did. Suggy-ho, Saurus the Skeptic. Did you know the skin on your elbow is called a weenus? Yep. There you have it for the $10 patrons, but we're not done because we wouldn't be done without giving some mentions to the patrons in the $5 tier, who are Yakko the Volcanic Muto, SSS06, Dazzle Fizzle, and Council of Geeks. Thank you folks so much for your generosity, it really puts a big old smile on my face. And to all of you at home, thank you so much for watching, and have a great day. Gotta juice and cut it loose.